Okay, I am really hoping that this time that this is going to work. I don't know why my computer is being such a jerk to me today. It is incredibly frustrating, and I will tell you right now that there is a very good chance that this is not going to be as interactive as I want it to be because on my iPhone it is very hard for me to like see the chat whilst I am going. So I apologize already just for the technical difficulties and also for the fact that I'm not going to be able to see your comments as interactively as I would like to. Um, and I don't even understand how to view the chat. Wow. Okay, yes. Cool. Alicia hears me and I made it so that it'll actually pop up the chat while I'm talking. So that's good at least. Okay, I apologize for the technical difficulties. My computer's being a little bitch. So what are you gonna do? Okay, so hey guys, we're gonna talk about the Hunchback of Notre Dame, and you're gonna get treated to some very shaky camera work because I'm just sitting here holding my phone. Okay, so I thought that what we would do is I would start by kind of running through like my review of it basically, and then maybe we could chat and we can all hear how things are going. Oh, Book Whimsy, who actually is an actual French historian and knows what the fuck she's talking about, is here. So if we have any questions that we need real answers to, we have an expert in the house, which is great. Okay, so I hope you guys have been having fun with the read along. I really enjoyed the experience of reading this with you guys and seeing what people thought about this book as we kind of went along. I will say, in terms of my impressions, I think if I had not been doing this as a read along with y'all, I probably would have DNF'd this book. And that is because, as you guys, I'm sure, noticed, this is a very interestingly paced book. And I did not always appreciate how interestingly paced it was. How about that? So here's the thing. I want to talk a little. So, in terms of like my rating or whatever, I would rate this book as a 3.5 stars. I'm giving it the extra half star, frankly, just from the experience of reading along with y'all and seeing what you guys thought. Otherwise, I probably would have given this a 3 star and likely would have DNF'd it. That being said, I'm very glad that I kept going with it because I think the more I got into it, the more, well, plot obviously starts picking up in the back half of this one a lot more than it does kind of from the beginning. So I enjoyed it just as a story, but I also really enjoyed like a lot of the kind of philosophical musings. I really liked, just like Victor Hugo as a writer. I think clearly he's a classic for a reason. I think I would also say though, having read this, I would not really recommend this as like a beginner's classic experience, if that makes sense. So anyway, yeah, pacing varied a lot, but it was a lot more enjoyable than you expected. That's great. Yeah, I think by the end I really was enjoying myself, but it took a while to get there. So in terms of like the history of this book and part of why it is paced so weirdly, Victor Hugo was contracted to write this book and basically was a big fat procrastinator. Like he just kept putting it off and kept putting it off, even though he had been paid a sizable advance from his publisher to create this book. And finally, there was a court case where his publisher was like, "Girl, you like get your act together. You've got to actually write this book." And the court ruled that he had until February of the following year, this was like in August or September, to produce this novel, to produce The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And so like if he missed the deadline for every day that he was late on delivering the book, he would have to pay, I think it was like the equivalent of a month's rent per day. So like he was under the gun. So basically the way this book was written was he like holed up in his bedroom, was writing 18 hours a day, just like nonstop, kind of just like bleh, pouring it out of himself. And like his wife and best friend weren't seeing him at all. They started having an affair because he was so MIA. And basically he just like sat down and like cranked this out in a very short amount of time. I think that is why this book has what I would argue are some like true pacing issues, because I think he had this specific idea about like this grand novel where Notre Dame itself is a main character and the city of Paris itself in this time period is a main character. So I think he was very in love with that as the idea of what this book was going to be. And I think it took a while for the actual plot to kind of catch up with like his idea about the mood and about like having a real passion for the building of Notre Dame, which was in utter disarray in this time period. Like it was falling apart. Like I think they almost tore it down. Like basically this book is a main reason why it was not just like razed basically in the 1830s, because it was like this decrepit building that nobody really knew what to do with. And like this helped kind of revive interest in it. And actually a lot of Notre Dame as we knew it since the fire, it's going to have a new life, a new design and a new kind of story to it. But as we knew it in up until very recently, was very much shaped by Victor Hugo's kind of vision of what it was in its heyday. So I think that's an important context for this book. A couple of other, I think, important context moments here. One, apparently Victor Hugo kind of felt like novels should be more theatrical. Like he had a lot of like theatrical criticism for novels in general. And like, I think Shakespeare was a big touch point for him. So I think knowing that going in, I definitely could see that a lot in the way that he structures specifically some of his crowd scenes. Like, I think it feels very much, especially in some of those opening chapters where like they're kind of bringing these crowds together and kind of giving you the overview of the city and whatnot. I think you can it really does feel like sort of at the beginning of a play where they're sort of setting all the scene and like bringing in sort of like the Greek chorus or like the background players. I think you can really kind of see the influence of some of that. So I think that's something to be aware of. The other thing that I found interesting about this, like as a book or sort of like something that impacted my reading of it, was that this feels essentially like historical fiction *2. So like Victor Hugo is writing a very specific vision of what medieval Paris was like. Like he'd done a lot of research and he knew a lot about this time period, and he, has this sort of very common in the Romantic era of this time, a very specific sort of like beautiful vision of what medieval Europe was like and medieval Paris is like. So to a 2019 reader, we are basically reading historical fiction written in the 1830s about medieval Paris. So like the layers of meta-ness to this text, to me, I thought were really, really interesting. So I thought that was also something that really impacted my reading. And I'd be curious when we get to some more discussion, like, so I don't know that I loved the translation that I had. So I was reading the Everyman's Library, which I know a lot of people were, and it was this, it was a translation from 1910, I think. It was an anonymous translation, and I found that translation to not be great. Like, I wish that I'd read a more modern translation, because even more so from the translation, it was like adding another layer of historical fiction in, because I could feel the hand of the translator very heavily. So it was like 4 layers in essence for me. It was medieval Paris as written in the 1830s, translated in 1910, read in 2019, and it was just like it was too much. Like I wish I'd had a more modern translation. Oh yes, I did have a failed live stream. My computer was freaking out, so I had to move to my phone, which is why you're getting some shaky handheld cam here. So all that to say, I think I just felt, okay, and Alicia's saying she felt that also in the Dutch translation. So yeah, I think I just wish that I wasn't as aware of the meta-ness in this book. It did make for an interesting reading experience though. So all that to say, I think that the context for this book and how it was written and the time period and whatnot, it really is impacting kind of the way that this book turned out. I do feel like all of the plot, most of the plot really is only happening in the last third. The iconic sections describing Paris. Okay, Dancing Lawn is saying that in French, she's also thinking that it was purposely old-fashioned at the time. Okay, that's interesting too. So maybe the translator from 1910 was more faithful than I thought. I don't know. It's interesting. So I do think that a lot of the plot is congregated into the back half of this book. Some of those iconic passages about this will defeat that. Where, he's kind of making these comparisons to the written word versus architecture in terms of like a tool for communication. I thought that that was a really compelling section. It's iconic. It's the kind of thing that you read and like, I hope Book Whimsy steals that for her class, because I feel like that would be, if I were still teaching church history, I would totally grab that as like a primary source text from this period, and I would have people write like a gobbet about it. I think that that definitely was an interesting passage, as was the bird's eye view section, which again, it's really clear that he is wanting to make Paris itself a character and Notre Dame itself a character. So yeah, I think that he achieves that goal. I just think for me as a reader, I appreciated it, but didn't necessarily enjoy it, if that makes sense. So once we started to actually get some real plot going, I found it a lot more interesting. I do think it's, in terms of characters, this is an interesting book in that I don't really know that we have a lot of likable characters. I'm trying to really, we were joking on Twitter that really, like, I think all of us are just hashtag Team Goat. Because really the goat was the most likable character and the one who pretty much was the only one who got a happy ending. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of people to like really love and connect with in this particular story. So yeah, that made for a more challenging reading experience, right? Because in most classics, you at least have somebody who you're like really rooting for and who like you can meaningfully think of as being like worthy of rooting for. No, I mean, not always, but I think that's something that we tend to expect from a book. Esmeralda, I guess, is the most likable character, as is Quasimodo. I mean, like, I think they're probably the people we're most meant to be rooting for, but both of them I found to be sort of inert in a lot of ways. Like, Esmeralda never really fully came together for me as a character. So I don't know. I don't know that we are supposed to be liking anybody, and I think it's an interesting project at this point in literary history that we, I think that the authorial voice is not really guiding us in a specific direction to like really love any of these characters. I don't know. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Again, I think Esmeralda and Quasimodo probably are the closest. Gringor, maybe. I think that's a little hard to say, but I thought that was interesting that there was so many complexities there. I also, so just comparing this to the Disney cartoon version of this, in that version, you definitely get the very clear interplay between Esmeralda, Phoebus, and Frollo. And you definitely in the Disney adaptation are meant to be like, Quasimodo's the only one who's not a total asshole. But Phoebus is much more heroic in the Disney version, like far and away. In this one, Phoebus can go die. Like, he is the worst. I hate it. Well, and Frollo too. Frollo's also awful in this. Like, none of them deserve Esmeralda. But then again, I also don't know that Esmeralda is all that like fleshed out for us to have super like strong feelings about it. So I don't know. I guess kind of my overall comment is I found my own responses to these characters fluid throughout and quite, and I was struck, I guess, basically by how many people are trying to compete for the attentions of Esmeralda, and how much that didn't really feel, I didn't feel like I had a clear person I was supposed to be rooting for, and I think Hugo was so aware of how problematic everybody trying to compete for her were. Yes, I agree that Gringor does feel like an alter ego for Hugo. I kind of felt like he seemed like he might be kind of a little bit of a Mary Sue there. Not that he was perfect, but just he did feel a little bit like maybe an author insert type character. So Esmeralda is so young. Somebody brought that up. So anyway, all that to say, I do think that, to segue, I think that based on the kind of characters we get and the kind of dynamics at play, I think Victor Hugo has a pretty complicated idea about how he is presenting race, class, and gender in this. Like, I would love to read a gender study of this, and like Esmeralda is this sort of like somewhat empty vessel that all of these creepy ass men are like projecting onto and like using as this object of desire. Like, I definitely feel like you could have a very particular reading of gender in this. And I think it's interesting to me that Victor Hugo clearly is not sympathetic with like all these creepy ass men, you know, using her. And like, I don't know that I'm not calling him like some proto-feminist or whatever, but it is interesting to me that he's not expecting you to be sympathetic with the fact that these are all super asshole guys. I guess except for Quasimodo, but again, does Quasimodo really know Esmeralda? Like, what does he really want from her? Again, I mean, at the end, I think we're supposed to, you know, kind of with the final scene and him, you know, essentially curling up and dying with her. I think we're supposed to see that probably as the closest thing to a happy ending or like a noble sacrifice or whatever. But I just think, I don't know. It's interesting to me that I just think that there could be a very interesting gendered reading of this. I also think it's interesting that Quasimodo, he's playing with race with the characters of Quasimodo and Esmeralda. Now, he does refer to these characters with the G word. I am not comfortable using that word, so I'm going to refer them as Romani, or the Roma. So Esmeralda is sort of a false Romani woman, and Quasimodo, who is this, you know, deformed whatever, is actually Romani. And I don't really know where we're supposed to be landing with how we think about that group of people. I think considering that they're the two most sympathetic characters besides the goat in this, that probably says something about Victor Hugo having some level of interest in how that group of people was treated. But anyway, I think that there could be an interesting sort of like race-based reading of this. Class-wise, for sure, I think that there's very nuanced portrayals of class in this, and especially getting into like, we have kind of just the hoi polloi, like the everyday people. I don't think that he's wholly sympathetic with the crowds at all. Book Whimsy was talking about this on her Instagram the other day, and I definitely agree with that he's not, it's not like he's just like, oh, you know, the bourgeoisie will rise up and like, or the you know, the underclass is going to rise up and overthrow all these oppressive forces. I don't really think that's what he's going for in this, but you know, I think he's definitely not sympathetic to the priesthood in the character of Frollo. Side note, sorry that this is so rambly, that's part of me being live, but can we just come back to Frollo? And like, I remember when I saw the Disney movie as a kid, being so traumatized by Frollo and not really understanding why. As an adult, when I saw that movie with my nieces, I was like, this is one of the like most hardcore portrayals of like lust and like predatoriness that I have ever seen, and it is in a cartoon meant for children. It is so intense, and like seeing that in kind of the source material, I honestly think that's one of the elements of the book that the Disney adaptation gets the most right in terms of sort of how he's originally portrayed. So anyway, so I don't think we're meant to like really be sympathizing with the priesthood, and I think I don't know. This seems like there's a really pointed critique happening of the Church, of Catholicism, and then also, you know, Victor Hugo himself had a very conflicted relationship with the idea of the monarchy. This is a period of French history, which I'm not as familiar with this period, but like there's a lot of up and downs in this time in French history of like, you have a king, then you don't have a king, and then you have like a kind of puppet king. Like there's a lot of conflictual feelings about monarchy in this period, and I think that definitely is reflected in the text. So, yeah, I guess the only other thing I will say is that this is a tragic ass ending, which I guess shouldn't surprise us given that this is the same guy who wrote Les Miserables. But this ending is hardcore. If you were looking for like rainbows and sunshine, this ain't it, sis. So pretty darn sad. And yeah, that's kind of where I landed with it. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Let's see if I can get the chat showing up here consistently for me. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the read along. Any thoughts or questions or chit chat amongst you? It's, again, I'm sorry, on my phone it's really hard for me to see the chat consistently the way that I want to. So I'm gonna at least try to delete the old 2 live streams because my computer was being such an asshole. Anyone read Les Mis and thought it was more sad? I read what I'm going to assume was probably an abridged version of Les Mis as a child, and hated it because it was so sad. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this more sad or is Les Mis more sad? Let's see here. Trying to delete out these two old chats so that people don't accidentally go there. Religions failed to save Notre Dame. Government failed to save Notre Dame. The people failed to save Notre Dame. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think that it's not like he's got some main group that is going to come in and make everything rosy. Like, kind of the point of this is that, like, everybody's fucking up on this one. And none of us deserve Notre Dame, I think, is kind of one of the ending lessons here. So, reading it with everyone in my heartless that I say I didn't mind all the deaths. No, I mean, I think that that's sort of it's just tragic. Let's see, humans measure themselves upward and point downward. Let me go back up in the chat and see if I can find more things. Okay, yay, it looks like people are enjoying that we did the read-along. I think I probably will do something like this again in the future. We'll see. Yay, people started following Book Whimsy because she's awesome. Definitely should. Let's see here. I expected Hugo as a romantic to write the medieval period even more. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that you can tell he has like a hard-on for it. But that was a very romantic thing. And also just the fact that he was so enamored of these ruins. Like, if you look back through romantic poetry, they're constantly talking about ruins. Let's see here. We stan a lovely goat. Yes, go team goat. Let's see here. Humans measure themselves upward, pointed downward. I wouldn't have read it or even finished it if it wasn't for a read-along. Yeah, I mean, me same. I think I would have tried to read it, but I don't think I would have finished it if it wasn't for the read-along. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. Yeah. Other thoughts? I think this does, I will say, I think this doesn't make me keen to try Les Mis. Like, I thought maybe I would try to do a reread as an adult of the non-abridged version based on this. I think that this is probably my one unabridged outing with Victor Hugo. I think I'm good to go now. Thanks for organizing. Yay. Does anyone know of any retellings? I mean, the Disney. And I think, did I hear that they're doing a live action version of the Disney retelling? I don't know. That would be interesting. Let's see here. Oh, okay, Dancing Lawn does want to read Les Mis now, so that's good at least. I'm glad that somebody is enjoying this. A couple of beautiful videos about Notre Dame on YouTube. Yeah, that would be good. Thanks for putting this together. Enjoyed it? Yay, I'm glad, Allison. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm curious if anyone knows of anyone using fiction novels these days to do things like what Victor Hugo tried to do here to bring attention to and save Notre Dame. I don't know about Notre Dame specifically. I'm trying to think of like some of the big kind of medieval retellings. Well, there's Pillars of the Earth, which I hate. But I know a lot of people really love that. And he definitely was, I think, trying to bring, back the epic historical novel. So I don't know. Does anyone know of anybody trying to use this kind of historical fiction to preserve a building? Yeah, Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. I did not like that. But I am definitely in the minority there. It's a big bestseller. The Disney movie is the best, a whole other story, but so good. I agree. I think that this book could have been spiced up, frankly, with some more singing, dancing gargoyles. So, did anyone else find Gringor mildly irritating? I found pretty much all the characters at least slightly mildly irritating at times. So, yes, I would lump him in there. Yeah. See here. Okay, I think I've got my other two failed attempts privated, so at least nobody can erroneously happen upon those. I'm gonna have to figure out what's wrong with my computer. You live in a society where clowns remake cartoons for dollars. Okay. Any thoughts on Frollo and I didn't. Okay, how would one say Bro's relationship, Jahan? I didn't. I don't know. I kind of thought of it similarly, I guess, as I did to Quasi. Frollo just seemed to be like abusive, just like in every relationship that he seemed to have. So I kind of felt like there were some parallels there. Yeah, such a heartbreaking brother-brother relationship. I will say again, points to the Disney adaptation. I do think that they capture that sort of complicated love relationship between people who are what word am I looking for? Sorry, tuned out there. Complicated family relationships that like you can love and like resent and hate someone all in one. I think that they actually capture that pretty well. I was irritated by the backstory of the woman in the cage under the ground, a rat hole in my Dutch translation, but it was quite good stitched together in the end. Yeah, it was good. It just felt sort of like I don't know. Maybe I'm just simplistic and want things to stay a little bit more on plot. I have never read a book in my life and I am 40. I hope you change that. But, teach their own. Do you think Frollo's failures made him evil? I mean, I think that's kind of part of what this book is about. Is just like they're all kind of evil and not evil. They're just like this is a book that I think is very in tune with just like the realities of human frailty. And so, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm not sure how interested Hugo seems to be in sort of good, evil labels. Like, I don't know. Esmeralda's mother was an interesting character. She's the one I found most tragic. Yeah, that was real sad. I mean, I saw that like twist coming from a mile away, which I think we all did, but there you go. I didn't like the relationship as brothers, but Jahan was only wanted his brother for money, so I disliked them both. Yeah, nobody's wholly likable in this. Who else knew the lady in the rat hole was going to be Esmeralda's mother? I saw it. Yeah, I think I think that he flagged that pretty well for us. Yeah, she's really showing the superstition at the time, for sure. Like, I think some of that, that's an interesting theme that Hugo has it's really clear that he wants the reader to have insight into like what we look on as like past superstitions or past forms of cruelty of like, I would never, I don't know. I think he's trying to comment on in the present it is very easy to look at the past and make judgments about, well, I would never treat someone that way, or if that was happening in my time, I would never participate. But I think he's wanting to draw the parallel to his own time and the cruelties of his own time, and invite the reader basically to see like, hey, like this is the Dark Ages, but like we're still in the Dark Ages. Like in some ways that's sort of like an angsty teenage type theme of like, we're the monsters. It's not, they're not the monsters, we're the monsters. But I think that that's kind of a timeless insight. So like, yes, for the superstition and kind of like casual cruelty that is being portrayed in this book as a part of the medieval milieu, I think he's wanting us to make the parallels to his contemporaries. But then I think that also invites comment, to us today, right? Like, I think that we could ask some questions about who we allow in and out in our society and how we treat people who do not have power in our society. Yeah, you can definitely make some pretty obvious comparisons there. I think country to country in the US, pretty clear places right now we could make some of those parallels. I also think that the relationship, quote unquote, between Quasimodo and Notre Dame and her bells was beautifully told. Ooh, come back. Okay, and her bells was beautifully told. I felt that love. Yeah, I mean, I think that's some of the, maybe not the most exciting writing, but he does have just beautiful passages about Notre Dame in general, in this book. Like, he's very clearly wanting to make that building a character, and I think he does that really effectively. I thought it was weird that Jahan, and that's not how you would say that. I can't even think of how you would actually pronounce that. And Quasimodo were almost strangers in their scene when Don Claude must have taken care of them both growing up. Yeah. But he's also deaf because of them. Yeah, so it's like, oh, okay, yeah, Quasimodo and the bells, like, the kind of give and take there. Okay, I'm gonna take somebody out of the chat because they seem to just be sort of spamming. So I know it's not the same, but does anyone else think the Phantom of the Opera? Yes, 100%. I see so many. So yes, thank you for bringing that up because I meant to mention that. Yes, I think that in terms of like the types of themes and like the relationship between this sort of disformed outcast and a building, 100%. I think that Gaston LeRoux, I believe is the author, has to be drawing on this book as a inspiration. Yeah, for sure. Though the book, okay, I'm gonna take that person out. Sorry. Yeah, I read The Phantom of the Opera as a kid and did not enjoy it. And you know, I don't know how I would feel about it now, but if you, I read it because I love the musical so much, and you know, I guess I would just caution you, if the reason you want to read Phantom of the Opera is because you also love the musical, I don't know that you would love this that much. But, you know, to each their own. I think, yeah, you can feel free to give it a try if you think that the themes in it are compelling and you want to just give it a go. But yeah, Marina, I totally agree that there's some very strong Phantom vibes. Yes, the book is very different than the musical. There's not as many, you know, operatic solos, creepy mannequins of Christine being sung to passionately. Not as many as you would hope. Yeah. So, I guess I would say in summary, this is a book that I'm glad you guys kind of compelled me to read just by virtue of leading the chat or leading the discussion. But yeah, I don't know that it's my favorite. I would not recommend this as a starting place for people looking to get into classics, only because I think that, I don't know, I just think that the pacing of this is tricky. I think it takes some getting used to and some patience. So I don't know that it's like a beginner's classic, but I think that if you have some sort of special interest in the story, you really like this period of history, you really like Victor Hugo, like there's definitely things here to love. Like it's not like this is, you know, I can totally see why people I see why this is a classic. Like that's not a mystery. But I don't know that it fit my personal taste preferences all that well. So yeah, that's just sort of my feeling. The pacing is very up and down, and there isn't a character you can fall in love with. Yeah, I think that makes it a little trickier to get into. I ended up giving it, how many stars did I give it? I gave it 3.5 stars. I would say if I hadn't been doing this project with you guys, it probably would have either been a DNF or a 3-star, but I enjoyed the discussion of this enough that it like just subjectively bumped my opinion of it up. And I think there's just so many like objectively cool passages in this that even if I didn't enjoy it necessarily, I admire it. So I gave it an extra little boost for that. So, thank you guys so much for reading along. I may try to do this again with another book, I think, at some point in the future. So stay tuned. But my arm is hurting me from holding this phone. So I think I'm going to go. But thanks, guys, so much. And talk to you later. Bye.